Hello, everyone. It is Fiona here from fionamarks.com. And today I am sipping chai with Fiona and Sachin. And yeah, here's mine too. And I just want to take the opportunity to welcome Sachin to the channel and invite you to say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to meet everyone again. And I hope you enjoyed the last video. I'm Sachin Sharma from Sachin Astrology. And astrology is my sadhana. Jyotisha is my sadhana. And I hope that the knowledge, this conversation that we share with you guys, with each other, the, the, the digging we do together is of great benefit to all of you. So
Me
let's
too. Sounds lovely. Thank you, Sachin, for sharing about yourself. And as usual, Sachin and I are in the middle of a conversation um, because we just rocked up here today. And as those of you who follow my channel and have my newsletter, my video newsletter every week, will know that my dad is up and down with his health and has been in hospital all this year, really. And Sachin was kind enough to ask me about his state of health and how I was in relation to that. And I was sharing how my dad is a little bit like if you imagine someone drowning, he's just managing to keep his nostrils just above the water level, but he's not really coming up above the water. And luckily, he's not really going down below the water either. He's really staying right at that level. And I happened to comment to Sachin about reflecting on Saturn, that it turns out my father has a debilitated Saturn in his chart. And I was reflecting on the clients that I have worked with Saturn in Aries and noticing how resilient they truly are and how life throws plenty at them and they keep going, and wondering whether exalted Saturn is actually not making someone necessarily more resilient, which is maybe a quality we think of with Saturn, but making them have a lower threshold. They just don't tolerate situations that are non-viable. They let them go more quickly. So more perhaps say no or let go, or a bit more decisive in that area. So we were reflecting on that, and I was asking Sachin what he thought about debilitated and exalted Saturn.
Yeah, and this is like the great. I think every astrologer really is confounded by debilitation, exaltation, and it's so interesting that Sun exalts in Aries, Saturn debilitates in Aries, Sun debilitates in Libra, and Saturn exalts in Libra. And there's so much philosophical insight that comes from this part of this way of looking at the planetary energies. So, as always, we just lay a basic foundation for debilitation. First, we need to check if the debilitation is getting cancelled. And there are four ways that the debilitation gets cancelled in. And the more the more of these ways, uh, the better. The more ways qualify, the better. So, for instance, I just opened this little document. So, first way is that the planet that rules the Rashi in which the debilitated planet is placed is on an angle from Lagna or the moon. So, the planet that rules the Rashi in which the debilitated planet is placed. So, if Saturn is debilitated in Aries, which it is debilitated in Aries, so Mars has to be either on an angle from the moon or the Lagna, and this helps Saturn figure its stuff out. It's still difficult. So a cancelled debilitation doesn't mean it's completely cancelled. It will still show the effects of debilitation, because by the end of the day, we have to understand that Saturn, if Aries is the field of experience that we are in, Saturn is in that field of experience. So Saturn is in Mars's sign now, Mars's place, field, and Mars can help it in these four cancellations, and Mars can help it, and other planets we'll talk about how it gets cancelled. But we have to know that Saturn is never going to feel comfortable completely at its best in Aries. Number one, and there are three more ways I'm going to talk about. But what's also important for all of us to understand is that whenever a planet is debilitated in D1, your Rashi chart, always check all the other Vargas, because you can really get into this state of hopelessness, fear, and that's not the point of astrology. I mean, it's, see, Saturn in Aries is going to be difficult, but Saturn in Aries is not going to be debilitated in all the Vargas. So check D2, D3, D4, D7, D9, D10, 12, 16, 20, 24, all of them, 30, 40, 45, 60, all 16 Vargas. And try to also tap into where Saturn is doing good, where it's in a
Mm,
friendly, great friend sign, exaltation sign, and be like, see, like, find all these other, there are all these other energetic imbalances in your chart, and we're all reaping the karmic merits and demerits. So there is no matter of pride or shame here, but where can you direct your attention to feel more joy, or feel like, okay, these are the areas of my life where life really worked out, and I'm happy letting go. And that's when it brings us to Saturn's purpose.
yep,
And so maybe what we can do is, in the description for this video, we can just share the four ways debilitation gets
of
cancelled,
course. Yes.
and we wouldn't have to like get technical in this video with these 4 points. And we can get onto with the last sentence I just said, which is letting go. Saturn
Yes.
excretion. So the bodily power of Saturn is excretion,
Yes.
and Saturn is also the last planet. And Saturn is really not considered to be a very desirable planet. Like in India, if you wake up and you see someone who seems Saturnine, people start repeating mantras and stuff, and they get scared. Once I looked really dirty, I remember, and I go to this bookstore to sell my old books, or to give my old books, and I'll never forget that moment. I was in my second phase of Sarasati, and he looked like a very like I I call it, I don't know, I might be offensive to some people. I call it rosary clowns. The people who do a lot of rosary, but they have no real understanding of anything. It comes from I think Kabir ji's Doha, Mala Fere Mashkara, which means rosary is done by clowns, and he's basically talking about the outer practices and how we need to go deeper at some point, even though outer practices, rituals and stuff are important in the beginning. But so he looked at me and he's like, it was so disrespectful, and I knew that I think the books he sells in his shop are all like spirituality, astrology books and stuff like that. So I have a sense that he knows about this stuff, and he like sort of like like he just pushed me away in that way, and I was like, wow. And it didn't hurt me because I knew exactly where this person was coming from, but that gave me such a intense direct experience into how Saturn is misunderstood in current culture. And so beautiful, because now we see Saturn as servants, and we like, okay, servants are bad. No, servants are doing a job that, sometimes it's not about inspiration. Sometimes it's about getting the job done. It's how Brene Brown, or one of these really inspiring people, talks about the shit sandwich that all of us need to eat in our work.
Yep.
Saturn, and people who have difficult Saturns don't want this shit sandwich, and when they get this shit sandwich, they get traumatized. And it's so interesting because now we have, so for example, if we look at Libra, it's
Yes.
ruled by Venus,
Yes.
and Venus is Virya. Venus is our trade, Libra, in Libra, trade,
Yes.
Gemini, and it says exchange of energy. And Saturn is exalted there. So Saturn is about restricting, saving energy, using it in the most efficient manner. Saturn is about efficiency, and Saturn is dull minded, like lazy minded, lame. And there is a right time. Ernst Willem says it so beautifully. He says Saturn's wisdom is that if you apply it at the right time, your dull mindedness, your laziness,
Yep.
as he also gives the example of Paramahansa Yogananda saying, sometimes when you're having a bad day, the best thing to do is go to sleep.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's how easy it is sometimes to deal with your Saturn. It's the easiest planet to deal with. Saturn has the most number of enemies.
Yes.
Saturn is not an enemy to many planets. So this is
Yes.
also a misconception. Saturn has the most number of enemies, which tells us the maximum, uh, the main problem that the collective consciousness or collective unconscious is facing is Saturn Lajjitaadi Avastha.
Hmm.
Either Mars is starving Saturn, Moon is starving Saturn, or Sun is starving Saturn, or agitating Saturn, or Saturn is shamed in some way. And it's always that Saturn issue that is causing uh, a debilitating uh, restriction and getting stuck in the past and stuff like that. So coming back to this part, it's like Saturn allows Venus to not lose its energy carelessly, and Venus and Saturn love each other for this reason.
Yep.
And Venus is pleasure, and Saturn is pain.
Yep.
And if we so imagine if Christmas never ends, if joy never ends, Christmas being the symbol of joy, uh, uh, can be taken as a symbol of joy. um, we see the sense of joyfulness would be lost if things don't end. If life doesn't end, the sense of being alive will be lost. So if you apply a thought experiment on yourself and you tell yourself, okay, maybe so if I tell you you're going to live for the next 10,000 years, so you're going to start sleeping 12, 15 hours a day, and you'll be like, okay, I can postpone these plans to 100 years.
Yes.
And you're going to postpone everything. Shortage creates value. And that's Saturn again. And that's why Venus is trade, Libra is trade, right? And when there's a shortage of things, it becomes valuable. When you bake a small cake, it it gets eaten very quickly. If you make big cakes or big huge cake, it starts getting wasted
Yep.
after, you know. And
Yep.
we see this in the kitchen all the time. Uh, so it's so beautiful. Now we see Saturn's ways. So people with a strong Saturn influence, but no wisdom, no Jupiter, this that, but only Saturn. You'll see for them being what's the word for it? Spendthrift, not wanting to spend too much money.
Mm-hmm.
That's making money. Saves energy saved is energy produced.
Yep.
Money saved. Jupiter is not like that. Jupiter is like abundance, more
Yep.
fruit and more fruit. Saturn is like, let's restrict things. So Saturn is about setting low expectations, invulnerability. Like, if I don't want anything from the world, the richest man in the world is the one who doesn't want anything.
Yep.
Yama Niyama, Patanjali, like no expectations from the world, complete restriction of the senses, pratyahara, and then you're invulnerable. David Goggins, extremely strong Saturn. He wrote a book called "You Cannot Hurt Me." You can't hurt me, and trying to be invulnerable. Dr. Nonaman Ra, my revered teacher, one of my mentors, he has a moon in Saturn conjunction. His moon is in Cancer, and he's with Saturn, and he fasts every day for like 23 hours. He's been doing it for 25 years, and so uh, it's very Saturn like that again. And so the debilitation of Saturn in Aries. So we did just discuss Libra part of it, the exaltation part of it, which makes Saturn feel really good about itself, being in the marketplace, being okay. What are you going to give me for this? And trying to extract the maximum juice out of it. And Aries part of it, where it falls. Why is Saturn now? Imagine Aries is hilly, rocky mountains. Look at a ram. If you want to understand Aries, you just look at a ram with its like hoofs and just like climbing like a mountain almost like this, and it's like climbing it somehow. And it's so interesting. Mars rules over minerals,
Yes.
and these rams like to climb really up, take a lot of risk, and lick the minerals on top so that their hooves and their horns become stronger. So they crave the mineral on top of the mountain. That's so interesting. That really clicked. I watched a video about it a couple of years. So we see an old man or someone who is not necessarily always old, but someone who is a bit cold. Saturn is a bit like end of life theme, or like it has nothing. Saturn has nothing there. Saturn is dull, lazy, and lame. Saturn has nothing to share. Saturn is starved, in it innately starving nature. So when whichever planet is with Saturn automatically gets starved, as what you really discussed very beautifully in your Avastha's video, which is so beautiful. Everyone should check it out. That's really nice. I loved it. And so incompatible. You don't. Uh, I watch my grandfather be like, I really used to like the mountains. Now I can't walk in the mountains. So they can't move, and Mars being movement, and Saturn cannot move around easily. So you see, Saturn and Aries people are always accident prone. So they'll be running into things. You leave them in a empty plane with nothing like better, and they'll run into something. It's so like it's so fascinating. And they'll be walking a straight road, and they just fall so quickly. And that's the thing. Aries, and what's also interesting is this gets connected to the idea Mars gets exalted in Capricorn, which is,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and this is where it gets really interesting. We can't talk about Saturn being debilitated uh, uh, without Saturn being exalted, and without Mars being exalted in Saturn's sign. Uh, uh, that Mars is exalted in Capricorn because Capricorn allows Mars to get that burden of the world that it can fight off and prove itself. So Capricorn is like this duty that you have to perform. The work of the world, your you can say social duty. Like if you're in an aeroplane, you're a doctor, a pregnant woman has an issue, she breaks the water or something happens, everyone is just looking at you. That's your 10th house. You're at a party, you're an astrologer, someone want you're the astrologer of the party.
Yep.
You're the You just can't help it. Someone is sick, you're an Ayurvedic physician, it's your duty now. That's your 10,000. Mars loves that. Mars loves to be on call.
Mm-hmm.
Likes to like show up when there's an emergency. So Saturn, again, bringing back to Saturn. Saturn being in Aries is uh, it's a cyclic madness of energy pattern in a way, trying to solve a problem using the same solution. So when you meet a Mars and the Saturn debilitated person, they keep doing the same thing with that house. And if it's second house, it'll be related to food and finances. If it's seventh house, it'll be relationships. And I've seen it every time. They just, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. But the energetic pattern is such, they're wired, they're habituated in a way that they just do the same thing, and that eventually just wears them out. The engine oil just dries up and the engine just starts to break down, and then they have either a big frustration with themselves if they have Saturn Mars conjunction, a huge frustration outburst, or like a and literal nervous energetic breakdown, which can come as inflammation on the skin or like liver, because Mars and fire element is connected, and fire element imbalances usually create some disturbance in the liver, um, with all the five pittas and stuff like that. And so you also see the idea of resilience with
Yes.
Saturn, because
Yes.
as we said, you have to do that Saturnine job, no matter how lame. Lame people walk, and they walk long distances, and they
Yep.
keep. You need uh, that constancy of action. Otherwise, it just piles up. Excretory system is the act of excretion is Saturn. The excreta itself is Saturn. So if you don't excrete, you die.
Yep.
That's intense. You don't eat, you don't die. You can live for like a few days. People fast for long days. You don't
Yes.
poop for a couple of days, and you can literally die. And that's you become toxic.
Yep.
There is toxicity. So when we don't let go of our Saturnine things, and it's not that easy. It's just let it go. Of course, just gotta mention it once. But when we don't work on those Saturnine stuff, it's just Saturn being time. Time gets wasted.
Mm.
You reset. Your ego resets. You die. It's like restarting your computer, losing all your windows, and whatever settings were set, you get a few things open up, which is your karmic imprint from past life,
Yep.
and you have no sense of who you were in your last life, no sense of where to begin your work from.
Yep.
Like, oh, okay, so you just cry, you just traumatize again, you're born, and you're like, okay, restart. So the foundation of this life, of this all the struggles that you face, just goes to nothingness. That's why life is so valuable. A sense of death makes life valuable.
Yep.
And what's also interesting is when I was studying my teacher's uh, class, he I remembered one of my little cousins I grew up with. He has a very weak Saturn, and he used to always be like, "Don't leave, like don't go." Whenever I used to leave his house, he'd be like, "Can you stay for longer? It's really hard to say goodbye." And that's the thing. It's just the air element detachment. Saturn being the air element, the air element detachment is not there. Where you're there with it, you enjoy it while it's there, but you're also like air. So you're just going to be in the next place, and that's the beauty of Saturn being exalted in Libra. Libra being a very
Exactly.
so Saturn in Libra. they don't have a very hard time like uh, navigating their social life. They can hold that space where they are a bit detached. And if this detachment is not guided by wisdom, they can end up in a difficult spot. Let's just say, like a bit like it's not healthy. All of this stuff. So I was like, so when I kept studying this part, I was like, so what is? So he kept saying, uh, so servant. Is it a bad thing to be a servant? I mean, Saturn is a deity, an aspect of God, and to bring some shame to a religious mind. Are you calling God bad?
Yep.
so
Yep.
so if you play around with that idea. Something only becomes a virtue, an action is a virtue when applied at the right time. So, how do we know what the right time is? How do we get the sense of like, okay, Saturn has this wisdom of letting go, detachment, and doing the hard work and stuff like that, and persevering through the hard stuff, but not all the time. And that's a bad habit. When you say, okay, I'm going to be like a Saturn to everything and everyone all the time. On just taught this so beautiful. He says that's a bad habit. When you get fixated on it, when you're a little baby and you say, "Can I have a candy?" and you get scolded for like 1 hour for asking for a candy, and now you're like, okay, your entire nervous system has learned that asking for something can lead to a crisis situation, an emotional crisis with your caretakers, with people who take care of you. Asking is not okay. Something like that can happen. And now you're basically, you decide, your nervous system, your subconscious decides that don't ask for things from people. It can lead to this. And
Yep.
now 30 years down the line, you're working at a company and you're like, okay, I've worked for 2 years. I needed a raise. I need some bonus and I need this money. I mean, I have some responsibilities to take care of, and you're not able to ask. You're, I mean, you know you should ask. Everyone's telling you, but your body is not allowing you to ask. Your nervous system is like crashing whenever you try to do it. And you see, when they go up to the boss, to the uh, employer, they they start shaking. Their nerves start shaking, and that's so when is the right time to switch that off, to switch Saturn off, to not apply dullness of mind all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that becoming a, a bad habit, let's just say. So I was like, is it Moon's receptivity? Is
Mm-hmm.
it Jupiter's wisdom? Is it Mars's willpower? uh, or Mars's will not power? Or is it so I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about it. I think Venus and Jupiter, the two priests, are the wise guides. And I think Venus really allows uh, Saturn to be guided, and Jupiter allows guides everyone, even Venus. So there's a Venus priest who's like the highest priest, and then there's a Venus priest. Venus and Saturn have a closer connection in some ways.
Yep.
Jupiter can like guide Venus as well as Saturn as well as everyone, because it's ether, it's everything, space. Uh, uh, and that's the right understanding thing part, the part of it, where if Saturn is in Aries, and Saturn is debilitated, who can soothe that Saturn? So,
Mm.
the help for that Saturn can come from Venus, and Venus can, and sometimes help can be just getting a foot massage or just being told soft things.
Yep.
And that's why any astrologer who gives you a truth, uh, I just wanted to say it from the last session, just came to me, and the truth is hurtful to you. Uh, you might need it, but it's not being told in a helpful way. The astrologer
Mm.
is helpful with it. it's not just fire that astrologer. So if the astrologer criticizes you, projects something on you, fire them, because two of the most Saumya, soft planets, Venus is the softest, and then the Jupiter, are Venus and Jupiter.
Yep.
And if you have any harshness from them, any criticism or like any fire or pushing, especially when you're trying to work on Saturn, uh, I mean, any like even Sun can be guided by Jupiter. Mars, if you have a lot of fire to like, I want to play sport, but I can't. Jupiter, the Jupiterian coach would be the best, and you see that I haven't done any research on this, but it just logically makes sense. I haven't seen birth charts of these coaches. Something we can
No, research next time. Yeah.
talk about. So here I was saying about talking about criticism. So so there's this book called Vital Lies and Simple Truths. It's a very serious book, and the psychology of self-deception, but
Yes.
there's these some vital lies that uphold the system, and it has a very serious example. I mean, I think I just didn't read the last 20 pages of the book. It just gets really heavy in like last few pages. There's nothing rotten here in Denmark. I mean, that's the one of the last chapters, and there's some vital lies that I need to be told because we don't know the exact scenario. No matter how much an astrologer tries to be like, I know what's exactly happening. There's always a missing piece of the puzzle, and there's some vital lies like. I mean, you can have a really bad Saturn, and you'll be like, okay, you get angry all the time, and it's in your chart. So if that person believes that astrology is fixed, can never be changed, they're gonna they're just gonna become that angry person completely. This can play out in many complex ways. So instead of that, you can be like, you have a tendency to get angry, but you also have the capacity to overcome it, and these are the ways you can overcome it. And then they're like, yeah, I mean, and when they are when they're failing with their anger, working on their anger later, they're like, yeah, I mean, I have that, but I know I also have the capacity to overcome it. And they always do, because there are 16 other Vargas, and there is so much more to life. And then they can be like, and I'm just not doing it right now. I mean, so they take, there's an element of self responsibility, there's an element of help there, and there's simple truths, and there's something sometimes a truth so simple. Like recently I gave a reading to someone, and she's like, what's my purpose? And I was like, to create art. And she's like, what does that mean? I was like, you make life meaningful. She's a tattoo artist, and she was struggling with like starting up, and something clicked, and she's
Yes.
like an artist. And then she just I think this happened a couple of months back, and there hasn't been a day she hasn't done a tattoo. uh, she's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'm giving order to the chaos of life. I'm giving meaning to everything. I described what art does to people, and it just organized the mind, and it's like, yeah, perfect, let's do it.
I
So
think this is where astrology can be really helpful, is when we get lost in the meaning of our life. Astrology really has some good signposts. And as you say, often they're very simple,
so
but they're profound for the person who's receiving that message. They're profound.
yeah.
Sachin, there's so many threads to examine in what you've been talking about. To bring it back to that original, uh, what do we see in someone with debilitated Saturn? What do we see in someone with exalted Saturn? I think perhaps what I'm picking up on there from what you've shared is that someone with debilitated Saturn as maybe a little bit, or afflicted Saturn who's having some problems, is a little bit like that example you gave of the lolly, that when they ask for something, they get this traumatic experience, and so they learn not to ask. And it makes me think that debilitated Saturn there, the person becomes like a punching bag or a doormat or whatever, that they learn that life is going to treat them very harshly, and they kind of surrender to that, or as you say, could be angry, depends on everything else that's going on in the chart. But that Saturn doesn't let them down, that these punching bags or doormats, they take a whole lot of beating. Like they really have this ability to endure and maybe demonstrate some of those things that we most strongly associate with Saturn. Yeah, and I guess that was, you were mentioning about that dull mentality, that maybe not knowing when to switch off that lack. Yeah, and then it makes me think then about the exaltation, that that ability to say, no, I don't need that. No, I don't want that. No, that's not good for me. Like eliminate, exactly as Saturn does in the body. That the person with exalted Saturn has such a threshold for that, that is at a level where they can easily say, that's not good for me. I'm expelling that from my life. And so we don't actually see resilience from that person because we don't have to, because they eliminated what they would have had to endure, but they didn't have to endure it because they eliminated.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it, it's it's like trying to fix something unfixable. Saturn, so Mars,
Yeah.
uh, there's first of all a block with Aries, so it, and whenever there's a block, we try to overcome it, we compensate for it, and then Aries being, uh, I think I want to go there, and then Saturn being like, you can't, and then Mars, and there'll be a person in your life who say that, most probably, and who's creating that inner dialogue, at least, even if it's not a physical person at that moment, but there must be something in the past or something that the person themselves have picked up on from a parental pattern. Often I've also seen like the parents are quite genuinely uh, ha- trying to do their best, and they haven't done anything traumatic at all, and the person with the weak Saturn picks up on things and just creates mm, that trauma, like it's real because it's created now, and it needs to be then acknowledged as real and then worked upon as real. But and it can be so frustrating to work with someone with a debilitated Saturn, because they're just going to try to use the same solution to fix the same problem, and then just crack, and they become intolerant of others, and they try to fix things that are not theirs to fix. Always, like Saturn and Aries, if you have, or if you have Mars starving Saturn, we every person with that is trying to fix something external
Mm,
that needs fixing within themselves.
yeah.
So
Yeah, which is really inflammatory, and for the body and for the relationships.
relationships, and they can be an activist often, and their activism is not really very productive. Like it's not a part of their life. I mean, they'll be a financial analyst, and they'll be, instead of just being a good financial analyst, they'll be really angry about what's happening in the world of nutrition, and then they're just so focused and angry and agitated so much about nutrition that they're neither a good financial analyst nor a good nutritionist. So they're just like choosing other people's battles, and we have to remember that Saturn is leave me alone. That's what I call it. It's a leave me alone planet. Just accept it and be like, this is just, and that's when, once you accept it, you have to cry about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
About this.
I have a series at the moment where I'm examining agony in the chart. And, I think Saturn, it's really good what astrology reminds us as Westerners, because we're a bit obsessed with Mars' thing of fixing everything. Saturn and astrology is a good reminder that there are things that are lost and that hurt, and that's okay. That's a balanced experience of life. So yeah, we've got to cry sometimes.
I just want to add, like, what a deep implication you just said. Like, Saturn just a part of astrology, which just tells us what to let go, like what to like, just be like, it's never going to change. This is part of my burden, a cross that I have to bear.
Yeah, and it's even not when I believe when one can let it go. I like to think of it like weather. You might not like the grey days. You just have a preference for liking sunny weather, but grey days are part of the climatic balance, and to always be trying to make the day sunny. It's just against nature, and that when there are grey days, that's great. Like we said, it's a good day to stay in bed,
Mhm.
read a book. Now, I was also thinking about the exaltation and debilitation, that the Aries top of the mountain thing is that Saturn doesn't want to be seen either, and so I wonder whether that being in Libra, the natural seventh sign, that is the sign of the other, being in the marketplace with all the traders, that Saturn's good blending in or being one of a crowd. And it represents, as you said, servants, but also represents the common man, right? The connection that we all have to humanity. And the stress for Saturn in Aries is that the energy of the sign is always pushing that person to the top of the mountain, where they have to work really hard to get up the mountain because it's against the nature. But then even if they do achieve that being at the top of the mountain and being really visible, having all the sun illuminating your whole body, your whole being, is a very uncomfortable experience for Saturn, because of what you were saying. Don't see me.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a dog who's like, don't see me. She's a wonderfully lovely dog, and she just wants to be invisible. And when people see her in the street on the lead when we're walking, she barks and gets aggressive, because she's like, how dare you see me? I'm invisible.
It's interesting. And so I just want to add to that, like, it's not that Saturn in and of itself is the leave me alone planet. Saturn is just this detachment which allows us to be in the world and not be bothered by it and just get what we need to do, get that done. So
Yep.
because Saturn rules over Capricorn, and Capricorn is actually the most visible sign. Is so and Aquarius being like the part where we get validated, we achieve, we get a sense that we have achieved something because a group acknowledges us to have achieved that thing. Not that we have actually achieved something,
Yep.
uh, but a group said that you've achieved something, like a certificate. So you
Yep.
might not know anything after the certificate, but because this teacher said it and 500 people in that college, university said that you can do this, you feel really good for like 1 or 2 or 3 years until you join and get a job and you realize, oh, life is really tough. And that's again Capricorn, and like, oh, it's tough. It's not a big deal. So but what makes it a leave me alone planet is when there's a difficult Lajjitaadi Avastha towards Saturn, either Sun causing Saturn, so a king trying to make a servant into a king.
Yep.
As a king is constantly looking at the servant and being like, "Have you done this properly? Have you done that properly?" Saturn's like, I'm not a doer. And you see like the part of the house or the cusp Saturn rules in the chart, their personality cannot leave that thing alone, and they compensate for it. They want to prove something to that thing. With Moon, it can be trying to get your emotional needs fulfilled from something that can never fulfill it. So if
Mm,
it's house, you're gonna try to get your emotional needs fulfilled from a partner who just can't do it.
yep.
You'd have a completely opposite love language or something like that, and be like, oh, I love giving gifts, and they like poetry, and I
Yep.
hate. something like that.
Yeah.
And Mars starving Saturn would be something where choosing the wrong battles. So, like
Yeah.
being agitated about the political system while your own house is in your own internal politics of your own like super micro domestic politics has gone wrong. So you're bothered what the president and the prime minister is doing
Yeah.
while the internal micro domestic affairs of your life are not in place.
Yeah.
So it's just that's when we need to leave those issues alone. That's when Saturn's like, leave this thing alone and focus on what's really important to you, which is an exalted Saturn in Libra. And it's like, okay, this is what's important to me. And then they can be so detached, and then they can seem hurtful to
Yes.
other people with other issues and be like, okay, I'm going to leave you guys alone and I'm going to travel. And when I'll become this amazing person after 5 years, I'm going to come back, maybe, if they do. And you're going to be grateful for this thing. For instance, my mom was like, don't leave home and do this thing. And I was like, I have to, because after 5 years, the kind of person that I'll become, you'd be glad that I've become that
Yeah.
person. I don't
Yeah.
leave. The person I'm going to become is the person you're going to not like. And she's like, huh, I get it. I have a good pattern. I was like, yeah, I can be a bit detached for a couple of years and you do your thing. And
Yeah. You know, I don't know whether you have seen it or whether the people watching, but I always think Dobby in Harry Potter is a good example of Saturn.
uh,
And have you seen it, Sachin?
yes, I have.
Yeah, and Dobby in the second book, he is when he arrives, I think, because he's determined to save Harry Potter from this threat that has been put in place. And it's like Dobby, their house elves, their servants, they're actually invisible. The kids at school don't see them, but the house elves, create these wonderful meals all the time and keep the castle clean and tidy, all this kind of stuff, but you never see them. And Dobby sort of escapes to try to help Harry Potter, and it's a bit like Mars starving Saturn, because Dobby's taking action by himself, and he actually endangers Harry Potter's life more by meddling, but he can't help himself because the love that he has for for Harry Potter, um, and and I think that's a good way for us, again, as Westerners. I don't think we're really in touch with our Saturn energy, and that there are Dobby things. And I mean, these house elves, they're not allowed to have clothes. They have to have some recycled sock or something that they're allowed to wear. But if anybody gives them clothes, they're liberated. And yeah, and I just think it brings into our mentality lots of things about Saturn, that help us look at working with Saturn in a helpful way. And as we said about perhaps my current hypothesis that debilitated Saturn is a bit more like a doormat or has this punching bag ability. But that's like Dobby and all the house elves can just absorb a whole lot of abuse, and they keep doing their job because that's, whether they're abused or not, they keep moving forward, doing their dharma, doing what Saturn is called to do.
They do break down at some point. And when Dobby was free, he just like he sort of pushes like
He does.
for his dad. What's his name? What's Malfoy's dad's
Dad,
name?
I can't remember either, but we all know.
Yeah, we all know. So he just like pushes him back, and
Yes.
that's. And what's interesting, I would say, is it's debilitated Saturn with Rahu is perfectly like Dobby, because now they are believing that they are stuck. Actually, these elves are more powerful than some
They're
of the
the
great.
most powerful, and they're so essential to the resolution of the plot because they can just apparate in and out of anybody's, whatever charms have been put on to stop that. They just do it anyway. And yeah, that's what servants are really like, isn't it? That they have access to everything in the castle and the kingdom, but
Even
you
in,
don't see them.
have you seen Handmaid's Tale? Oh, that's so beautiful. Handmaid's Tale is a bit difficult to watch if you are into women empowerment and stuff. Like, if you're really into, if you feel really deeply for it, it's a bit a traumatic show. I love that show. Uh, just to say one more line, it's a world where Jupiter, there is no Jupiter. Jupiter
Yeah.
is either debilitated
Yeah.
with Venus and Mercury, or like there's basically the Jupiter energy, a solar system without Jupiter.
Jupiter. Yeah.
What a show! But anyway, yeah.
I know, there's so much, there's so much. Now, I want to get onto something else still in the Saturn area. And it kind of goes with Rahu as well. So you've brought it in there, which is that um, Saturn has a lot of fear, right? It's a planet that fear energy, fear of being exposed, and just will do anything. So it makes it kind of conservative because it wants to not make mistakes and not expose how problematic it is. And then Rahu can be very impulsive. So it can make this really strange dichotomy between the fear and the impulsive fascination. But I wanted to talk about Saturn and fear in this context, that there's a yoga, which I love talking to everyone about at the moment, which is if Saturn is exalted in an angle, that it's a rabbit yoga.
Yeah.
Um,
Asha Yoga.
yeah. So actually, you can correct my pronunciation. Do you say Shasha or Sasha?
I think Sasha or
Sasha.
Shah. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but Sasha. Let's
Yeah. Hence rabbit, because I can remember that. But it's quite fascinating because, again, like zooming out from astrology without knowing much, one would imagine that exalted Saturn is actually the best planet. Like, you got to have, if you were going to have one planet exalted, it would be easy to think from afar, why not have Saturn? Because it's the toughest planet there is. So if it's doing its best, great, only for the good. But here in this very distinct constellation where it would be in an angle, then we see that the fear is really activated for that Saturn because of that being on that angular placement. And I just
Mm.
wondered whether you had anything to share about Saturn at its best and yet in a placement that maybe doesn't suit it.
That's a very interesting observation. Being in an angle, being the planet. So we need to see that it's not. Let's consider that. Is Saturn really a planet of fear? That's what we need to first, because that's the premise. That's the assumption we are taking forward and making the argument. So if we see like if is I don't think Saturn is the planet of fear. Saturn is just it's time itself, and you can say it is in some ways. To some extent there is some fear, and if we don't have that fear, we become maybe it is. It makes sense because Saturn is very careful. It
Exactly. But I think it's good to reflect on that, Sachin. I mean, this is what we're here to sip chai over, because as you were saying that, one could also say that being on an angle, Saturn is more visible in to others, right? So I've got Saturn, for example, on an angle, exalted on an angle, let's say, then that Saturn is more visible to others because my first house, fourth house, seventh, or 10th house are the houses that are more likely to interact with the outside world, to be activated. And it is in our interaction with the outside world, when Saturn is visible, that we will receive fear from the environment, right? Because people um, perceive that Saturn and are just exactly as you started our session today. They see the dirty man on the street and they start doing the mantras for salvation, that I've come in contact with Saturn, I need to protect myself. So whether Saturn is the planet of fear, or is it that being visible provokes a fear response in people, that therefore the person with the Saturn learns every time I show myself, fear is around, therefore it gets associated with fear.
What's even more deeper than that would be that is fear bad? Because
Yes,
that's what we're living with right now, I guess. Seeing fear as something undesirable and bad, but it keeps us alive. I think it all comes down to right understanding and the wisdom guiding every force. Anger can be good, fear can be good. If fear, I mean, Venus uses Saturn's fear. and that's why they love each other. And it's a complex topic how that happens. Jupiter can guide Saturn's sphere. I mean, darkness delivers depth. That's one of my key mottos, and that's the darkness of Saturn. The self-imposed, as Dr. Nun says, self-imposed discipline is the surest way to improve the quality of your life. And I think exalted Saturn understands that, and that's what makes an exalted Saturn a Mahapurush. So it's a Pancha Mahapurush yoga. So it's a great person yoga,
Yes.
great yoga. So Saturn
Yes.
understands that I need to do difficult things, and it can really, an exalted Saturn allows the person to really go far off into their Rahu, because they know they're not going to die. They know they're going to make it happen. For example, I know someone with an exalted Saturn who's in India right now, and they ran out of money, and they've been here. But they basically have an unlimited visa because of the COVID thing, and they created a business out of an artwork that they're learning, and they're like, I'm going to survive using my creativity. Their Saturn is exalted in the fifth house, so they're using their creativity, and they're using their Saturn, and they're using the Libra's marketplace, and they're making it happen.
Yep.
So Saturn is, they really utilize fear well. That's, I think that hits the mark in my mind right now.
Yes.
That Saturn really knows, exalted Saturn knows how to use fear. Debilitated Saturn doesn't know how to use fear. So it'll feel fear, and then it'll adapt to the fear in a way that is not healthy, either becoming the doormat, either bursting out on the other person, either becoming critical or intolerant about the other person, or an issue, because that's the breakdown stage of Saturn debilitation. You become critical and intolerant, and you try to fix things outside of yourself constantly. And exalted Saturn does not do that. It just knows that life is hard. So, and that's what makes it garvit, proud. That when I started that reading, I remember with an exalted Saturn, I was like, "Aren't you proud about being so detached and knowing that life is tough?" She's like, "Yes." And I was like, that really helps you have multiple relationships, right? She's like, yeah, it's in the fifth house. She's like, love, receive. I can love. She's been receiving a lot of love by traveling. Saturn and Libra travels also a lot, which is so interesting. Libra being travels. Ninth house being pilgrimages, travel for pilgrimage, not long distance travel. Pilgrimage being long distance more often than not. Third house being short, and seventh house being travel itself,
Yep.
as per Parashara, at least. So yeah, that's beautiful. Now I get it. I think I figured it out using you as my mirror.
Good. That is what our space is for. And I personally feel like this is a really rich area of reflection for astrologers is Saturn, and where it performs well, and where you think that it won't, but it does. So for me, I would take away, if you have Saturn in Aries, I would start wearing your badge, I'm resilient. Like, I wouldn't call it debilitated anymore. I think it's nothing's going to kill you. And actually, my dad, who's in hospital, and I'm not saying that he's been well his whole life. He's definitely struggled with health, but when he just had emergency surgery, that's why he's in hospital at the moment. And once he became conscious, 2-3 days after the surgery, when the consultants are doing the rounds, the surgeon came around and said, you're a very hard man to kill. And he meant it in a loving way. And so let's take off our debilitated Saturn badge and put on I can survive anything, because I think that's what I'm seeing. And let's keep exploring how and when Saturn performs well, because I think we just, in the West, we're really lacking a genuine, authentic acceptance of the power of Saturn. We've kind of banished it from our cultural awareness. We think, we just don't want to. But it's essential if, as we said, it's about eliminating. and a home with no bathroom in it. Imagine a home with no bathroom where you cannot get rid of your waste, and how wonderful it is, that timing in the body when we know it's time to get rid of waste. It's a very on time experience. So we can begin to honor our Saturn. And I loved when I traveled, I loved how Japanese people really make comfort in their bathroom, how they warm their toilet seats and they make the experience just incredibly clean. And I think it's a very Venus Saturn combination. So let's all, embrace our timing for elimination. And I wish you all in your life that ease of eliminating from your life that which has served and you're ready to let go. Sachin, thank you for sipping chai with me.
Thank you so much.
Great. I can't wait to talk to you again about some other really interesting topic in Vedic philosophy or astrology.
Me too. I can't wait for our next session.
Good. All right. See you all again soon. Bye from us.